Today I'm traveling to Serabit el-Khadim, ancient turquoise mine of Egypt. And I'm going there to film some of the oldest alphabetic inscriptions in the world.
We're going to go up to the Hathor temple. It's a very important site because of the ancient inscriptions that are found there. They say this is the precursor to the alphabet.
The story of the alphabet is a very important one. It will enlighten our understanding of the context of the end of the book of Genesis and the Exodus.
Looks like it's to the right, so we're going to go down to the mine and try to find them.
Either it's over here or over there. Oh, I found it. In this episode, we return to Egypt, this time to explore the Sinai, in search of the oldest alphabet in the world. The Sinai is a triangle of desertic and mountainous land connecting the African and the Eurasian continents, making it a key crossroad to Arabia and the rest of the Middle East. Exceptionally, this episode will be split into two parts because there is so much to show you. So we are on the road now, and we have a beautiful Peugeot 504. The Sinai is a vast desert of sand and rock, including some of the highest peaks of Egypt, with mountains ranging over 2,000 meters. The peninsula's location made it a spiritual and religious center. Its desert was the high place of worship of the Semitic moon god Sin, after which it was named, before becoming a refuge to the fleeing Israelites during the time of Moses and the Exodus. Its dry climate and rigorous high plateau and mountains make it still a high place of meditation and spiritual experience for thousands of pilgrims each year. The region's control has been disputed since high antiquity. Even before the dynastic era, Egyptians mined turquoise and copper in the Sinai. Copper was essential to the first dynasties that wanted to build great stone monuments. But today we will focus on the turquoise mines. Turquoise was mined at two locations, at the border between the desert and the mountain. Their Egyptian Arabic names are Wadi Magara and Serabit el-Khadim. The mines were worked intermittently and on a seasonal basis for thousands of years. These may be the first historically attested mines, and turquoise mining continues to this day. Turquoise is a semi-precious stone, a blue-green copper aluminum phosphate mineral. Sources of turquoise most accessible to ancient Egyptians were located in the southwest Sinai, in deposits that apparently were substantially depleted long ago. Turquoise, being a hard copper oxide mineral, meant it was exploited in the same areas and deposits as copper. But turquoise was the only mineral exploited at Serabit el-Khadim. Turquoise held significant meaning and value to the ancient Egyptians even before the dynastic era. Although turquoise is now deemed a semi-precious stone, Egyptians would rather value material based on its color, rarity, and perceived magical and medical properties. The amount of resources spent on mining turquoise likely reflects its cultural, religious, and spiritual significance for the ancient people. It was one of the most prized stone with lapis lazuli, used extensively in high-status jewelry, whether for ceremonial, ritual, or status objects. Its high spiritual and religious value linked it to the goddess Hathor. Pendants, necklaces and bracelets, amulets, seals, and was even used for furniture, statues, and sarcophagi, such as Tut's golden death mask, making it a rare commodity in ancient Egypt, reserved for royalty or nobility. Its light blue-green color was associated with fertility and vegetation and was greatly valued, Perhaps the earliest evidence of turquoise mined in the Sinai comes from tombs in the El-Kar region dated to around 5000 BC. Turquoise appears in a ferruginous layer of sandstone at an elevation of 808 meters on the Serabit el-Khadim plateau. Because the Sinai Peninsula was the main region where mining of turquoise was carried out in ancient Egypt, it was called Biao, the mining country, and Ghetyu Mafkat, ladders of turquoise. The remoteness of the site was outweighed by the richness of the deposit's value and by the religious and geopolitical importance of the site. The Sinai Peninsula has been mined since Neolithic era by hunter-gatherers that found flint quarries in the southwest Sinai. Serabit el-Khadim was the most important turquoise deposit in reach of ancient Egyptian expeditions. This site is also one of the oldest spiritual and religious centers of the Egyptian, Levantine, and Arabian world, located at a strategic position between the Egyptians and Easterners. Today I'm traveling to Serabit el-Khadim, one of the oldest turquoise mines of ancient Egypt. There, archaeologists have stumbled upon the oldest alphabet in the world. Many miners were employed to work in the turquoise and copper mine in the peninsula. And some of these miners came from Canaan, in the Levant. We were able to make this connection thanks to several stelae, representing certain details that corresponded to ancient Canaanite populations. And those miners engraved several inscriptions in the mines. In fact, they used Egyptian hieroglyphs, choosing about 20 or 30 glyphs to write their own oral language. These characters correspond to a Semitic tongue, giving birth to the very first Ajab. I learned about the history of these inscriptions thanks to this book called The World's Oldest Alphabet and written by Douglas Petrovich, published in 2015 by Carta Jerusalem. It's been over 150 years that the scientific community has been studying the script and have been trying to uncover its origin and translate its inscriptions that have been dated between 19,000 and 1500 BC. So this is the site of Serabit el-Khadim. Many of these inscriptions are now in Cairo, in the museums of Cairo, because these were stelas or stone slab fragments covered in inscriptions that have been removed so that they wouldn't be damaged or stolen. But some inscriptions could not be taken, including this one, which is the inscription I would like to film today. And it can be found in Mine L. Its name is Sinai 357. Anyways, I'm really looking forward to this and I hope I can find it. It will really be a privilege to be able to find it. It's going to be an incredible journey.
Salam.
Salam, my friend.
Salam. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Alright, I've caught up with Auda, who is gonna take me to the site of the mines of Serabit el-Khadim. And tomorrow morning, I'm gonna climb to the mines and the temple. So I can't wait to be there. So the intersection to leave the highway and drive inland towards Serabit el-Khadim is located between Abu Rdais and Abu Zinim. This is where we leave the highway. So here we have the marker of the antenna. We just have to mine this manganese truck. Now we're driving into the mountains, up Wadi Baba, 1 hour drive from the camp on this track, which gets better in a moment. We just had the sunset over there, and we're driving on the track, and we're crossing this wide plain in front of us. Just in the distance is the mountain of Serabit el-Khadim. Bir means well in Arabic. Over there are Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions that are also interesting. We're almost there.
One route here, one route here.
So we're now coming into the camp of Auda.
House Sheikh Ouda.
Et voilà.
Alright, we're here. Let's go.
Donc là,
We have arrived at Auda's camp. Just above over there, there's the track that goes up to the mine. We can also go through this side, this path that goes straight to the temple, instead of going through the mine. Well, I'm hoping there will be a bit less wind tomorrow so that I can film my images properly. What's so amazing about this place is that there's people literally in the middle of nowhere. It's the Bedouins that live here. Bedouins are the indigenous people of the Sinai and the Middle East in general. They are nomadic pastoral Arab tribes. They share a common culture of herding camels, sheep and goats. Muzaina, Tarabin. There are currently 8 Bedouin tribes living in the Sinai. And one of them is still in charge of turquoise mining today. Bedouins' ancestral way of life and deep knowledge of their environment, the desert, have made them essential guides for anyone traveling inside the peninsula. Whether ancient Egyptian mining expeditions, Christian-era pilgrims, 20th century archaeologists, or enthusiastic tourists like myself. Let's go.
C'est extraordinaire
It's
de penser qu'il
extraordinary to think that
y a des siècles de ça,
centuries and centuries back,
il y avait des gens qui
there are
venaient
people
ici
that came here
pour
to
extraire du
extract
minerai,
ore,
qui ont
and they
probablement
probably
emprunté
took
le même
the same
chemin.
path. Prophets, pilgrims, travelers and scholars have been drawn to the Sinai Peninsula ever since Mosaic times, and the extraordinary story of the Exodus of the Israelites as related in the Bible. This interest was renewed by the rise of Christianity in the 4th century, notably with the visit of the Empress consort Helena, mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. According to the Christian historian Eusebius, Helena undertook a trip to the Holy Land and the Sinai in 326. The oldest record we have of a pilgrim is the Latin journal of Egeria, a devout Christian woman that departed from Galicia in 381, returning to her homeland only in 383. Her writings, called Pellegrinae in Latin, begin ex abrupto with the ascension of Mount Sinai.
All around the mountains, caves have been carved out. And if one just took the trouble to put up some curtains, they would make marvelous bedrooms. Each bedroom is inscribed with Hebrew letters.
The place described by Egeria might be Wadi Mukatab, the Valley of Writings, or Serabit el-Khadim. Mention of these Hebrew letters appears 2 centuries later, around 550 AD, when they caught the attention of Cosmas, also named Indikopleustes, he who sailed to India in Greek. A merchant turned monk, Cosmas wrote that he had seen with his own eyes a great multitude of stones inscribed with Hebrew letters, going on to say that they had been given the script before their exodus in order to write their story down, and that they later communicated them with the Phoenicians, their neighbors, who in turn gave it to the Greeks. This was also the view of Ubulamos, a 2nd century Jewish historian.
Today we're going to go up to the Hathor Temple. It's a very important site because of the ancient inscriptions that are found there. They say this is the precursor to the alphabet. This will be my first time going to Serabit el-Khadim, and so we're thankful for our Bedouin guides and our new friends who are showing us these sites. Earlier this morning, the Bedouins were showing us these turquoise stones and volcanic rock. And this is probably how the ancient Egyptians found this site. There were Bedouins with their sheep going through the mountains, and they brought back these colorful stones. And that got obviously to Pharaoh, and he's like, hey, let's go find this site. And they started mining here. But definitely you'd have to be someone walking through the mountains to find this.
Andrew and I visited Serabit el-Khadim twice to show to you the 2 approaches to the mines and the temple. The north path is the most difficult, going through a steep gorge, but it is also the most beautiful. Andrew will show you the south approach, which path was built up to make it safer, but still goes through beautiful landscapes.
على الريش حبك حبيبي على الشفايف سكرة من دوني تحشيش يا طير يلي.
The temple is just above us. Now I just have to follow my guide on this little path that goes up to it. But I am very glad I have a guide. This place is really stunning. I'm very glad I have a guide with me. The path is very steep and narrow, and it requires some climbing in certain places. But my Bedouin guide seems unbothered, climbing even with his jandals.
See if we can find any inscriptions on the way up here. Like in Saudi Arabia, these darkened rocks, they would carve petroglyphs on them. We'll keep an eye out for that. Wow. Oh my, we have a boat symbol right here. Actually, there's another one up here too. Another one. There's a whole bunch of these actually. Wow. And hieroglyphs. This is amazing. These were carved thousands of years ago. What that means is this was the path we're walking on now for the tourist. This was the same route that they would have taken as part of their path up to the temple. It just goes and goes. A big boat symbol right up here. And you have a giraffe, actually. There's a giraffe right here.
ليش يفتشونا ما معنى مهرب شرد وغرب على الدرب الثاني شرد وغرب ما معنى مهرب ليش يفتشونا ما معنى مهرب مهيل شوقي مارك خيال
It's a really narrow path.
واني بحكي له وانا صرت بهوى واني بحكي له شرد وغرب على الدرب قبالي شرد وغرب ما معنى مهرب ليش يفتشونا ما معنى مهرب
As Christianity and science developed hand in hand, the interest for the study of the peninsula grew. Pilgrims from the Middle Ages, such as Wilhelm von Boldenselle, traveled to the Holy Land and Egypt, visiting the biblical sites, probably even to prepare future crusades. Then came the Great Age of Discovery, also known as the Age of Exploration, between the 15th and the 17th centuries. Europeans don't seem to have any records of the sanctuary at Serabit el-Khadim before 1761, when it was chanced upon by Carsten Niebuhr, who did not, however, record its name. The German mathematician, cartographer, and explorer visited the temple in the mines during the renowned Danish Arabia expedition of Frederick V that lasted from 1761 to 1767. The primary task of the Danish expedition was to determine if there were any inscriptions in Hebrew that might link the mountain to Moses, but all they found were inscrutable hieroglyphs. After Niebuhr's testimony, we find that of Pierre Victorien Lautin, known as Victorien de Laval, a French Orientalist, archaeologist, and painter. He visited the site with, as per usual for pilgrims and scholars at the time, a strong Christian background and desire to study the historical accuracy of the biblical narrative. Interestingly enough, he thought this was an ancient Egyptian necropolis, writing that the mummies have disappeared. He was also grieved by the state of the temple and the destruction he witnessed there, strangely imputing it to Europeans, indicating that the site was not only known, but in his eyes too often visited. We're arriving on the plateau. What a view. We're almost at the temple. We only have a little more climbing. It's beautiful. What a breathtaking view from up here. At the time, there were up to 3,000 people working here in the peninsula, spread across several sites, to extract copper ore, which was very important to make appropriate tools, especially chisels, that were used to carve out stones. We can spot the temple from here. Built on a rocky plateau dominating the entire site. This semi-rock temple has a double axis with a parallel succession of rooms leading to two sacred caves dug out in the mountain.
Well, we made it
to the temple site.
The Temple of Serabit el-Khadim is the most important mining sanctuary in all pharaonic Egypt. It was dedicated to both Hathor and Ptah. The sanctuary, built in the Middle Kingdom, was enlarged under the New Kingdom, but only in the axis dedicated to Hathor. The original temple is oriented along a southeast-northwest axis. However, due to a lack of space, the kings of the New Kingdom had to move their construction further towards the west, creating this bend in the structure. The temple was probably established on an older cultic site. Although the temple is jointly dedicated to two deities, Hathor remains the undisputed mistress.
Hathor is one of the oldest deities in the Egyptian pantheon,
and we can find everywhere in the temple these representations of Hathor. Ptah plays a secondary but nevertheless non-negligible role. We can clearly see that the weathering and destruction of the temple has really accelerated in the last years, especially since the 19th century.
Tourism was and still is one of the major problems, accentuating the degradation caused by weathering, damaging the inscriptions even more.
Today the temple looks like a pile of rubble, with only several stelae still standing up. I'm entering the precinct of the temple. Here, behind these stelae, you can see the entrance to the sacred cave, or the sacred grotto. Here we can see the approach, the hall, and the cave of Ptah. Next to it is the portico leading to the cave of Hathor, the goddess of femininity, fertility, motherhood, protection, and joy, associated with royalty and cultural status. Egyptians connected her with foreign lands, such as Nubia and Canaan, and she was commonly invoked in private prayers and votive offerings, some also leaving written prayers to Hathor, inscribed on stelae or written as graffiti. So here we have the niches where the idols were placed. They offered her valuable goods, such as incense and semi-precious stones. Prayers to Hathor mention only the benefits she could grant, such as abundant food during life and a well-provisioned burial after death. Images of cattle appear frequently in the artwork of pre-dynastic Egypt, as do images of women with upraised, curved arms, reminiscent of the shape of bovine horns. I am now standing at the entrance of the Temple of Hathor, the Egyptian goddess who was favored as a protector in desert regions and known locally as the mistress of the turquoise. Hathor's Egyptian name was Hut-Horu or Hut-Hor, translated House of Horus or My House is the Sky. The house referred to may be the sky in which Horus lives, or the goddess's womb from which he, as a sun god, is born each day. She was commonly called the Golden One or the Golden Cow in reference to the radiance of the sun. The Pyramid of Pipi has given us this inscription. Hathor says, "O Horus, I am your golden calf." Her priests would get drunk and have lewd sex, just like the golden calf episode of the Exodus. Cows are venerated in many cultures as symbols of motherhood, nourishment, and protection, because they care for their calves and provide humans with milk. Hathor is often represented as a human-like goddess embodying femininity and beauty, but having distinct cow-like features, such as her ears and horns, holding the sun disk, often with a red or turquoise sheath dress, as a reference to her mythological role. With the patronage of Old Kingdom rulers, she became one of Egypt's most important deities. More temples were dedicated to her than to any other goddess. Hathor was one of a handful of deities, including Amun, Ptah, and Thoth, who were commonly prayed to for help with personal problems. Prayers to Hathor mention only the benefits she could grant, such as abundant food during life and a well-provisioned burial after death. Today, this feminine deity could be compared with Mary and the devotion that some Christians give to the Mother of Jesus. Ptah plays a secondary role. Warrior god attached to the east and the desert, he protects the eastern borders of Egypt and saves men from the dangers inherent to inhospitable areas. There were many workers employed here in the turquoise mines. During the hot season, it was very complicated to work in the desert, so they had to organize seasonal expeditions that lasted several months. Egypt's National Museum in Cairo displays the tools used by miners, such as copper chisels and hammers, which they always kept and brought with them. Since they were far from everything, far from Egypt, far from their houses, and far from their temples too, they at least had to bring their gods with them. They built this temple here in order to be able to continue their religious rites, such as on this Sinai 271 stele, depicting a pharaoh bringing offerings to the goddess Hathor in her human form. It was Ulrich Jesper-Seetzen, a brave German explorer of Arabia and Palestine, who visited the site between 1809 and 1810 that first recorded the site's name, Serabit el-Khadim. There are currently several hypotheses for the etymology of the Arabic name, but there are questions about these interpretations and the topic is still up for debate. From the records, the temple was later visited by Carl Richard Lepsius in 1845. He was the first to conclude and prove that this was no Egyptian necropolis, but rather a temple. Several stelae also contain 19th century graffiti left by early visitors of the site. The Ordnance Survey of the Sinai Peninsula by the British Museum that lasted from 1868 to 1869 was very important for our current study. Some of the important members of the expedition were Edwards Henry Palmer, not to confuse with the Captain Henry Spencer Palmer, Captain Wilson and Reverend Holland. Their survey was a brave attempt at creating a Sinaitic encyclopedia, and although it didn't succeed in copying all the Sinaitic inscriptions, it constituted a beautiful point of view of the geography and nature of the region, completing the British Museum's impressive collection of stampings from the Sinai. Many of those stampings had come from the British explorer Major MacDonald and had been thoroughly collected by the then curator of the British Museum, Samuel Birch. But when he passed away, these copies of inscriptions were lost in the museum's archives. Palmer's copies of stampings from the Sinai sparked the interest of European archaeologists, such as Raymond Weil. At age 28, this young French army captain decided to follow his true passion and pursue a career in archaeology in Paris. In his ambitious, complicated and broad work, he received the help of many others such as Ricci, Lévy, Moret, Capart, Uringer, Spiegelberg, Borchardt, and others, to assess and assemble all the needed bibliography. Towards the middle of 1903, having been granted access to the British Museum's archives, Raymond Weil drew and published these stampings in 1904 under the title Recueil des inscriptions égyptiennes du Sinai, an English collection of Egyptian inscriptions of the Sinai. Among them, probably without knowing it, Palmer had copied in Wadi Magara one of the first proto-alphabetic inscriptions ever recorded. It appeared in Raymond Weil's collection on page 154 with the very brief description, Unknown Era Graffiti, one column of proto-alphabetic signs. Later on, Petrie named it Sinai 348, but funnily enough, this first inscription was later lost and has only been recently rediscovered. After his publication in 1904, Weil, after having found out about Sir Flinders Petrie's upcoming expedition to the Sinai, sent him a request asking to join his party. Flinders accepted the offer. The following year, in the winter of 1904 to 1905, Weil left for Egypt, making his debuts in militant archaeology under the direction of the renowned Sir Flinders Petrie as a field excavator and copyist. It had been exactly 26 years that Flinders Petrie had dreamed of exploring and carrying out an archaeological expedition to the Sinai Peninsula to study scientifically the inscriptions of Wadi Magara and Serabit el-Khadim. The Sinai expedition began in Wadi Magara in December of 1904, moving on to Serabit el-Khadim in early January and ending in March. This first extensive archaeological expedition's first mission was to copy all of the inscriptions, and excavations were the second phase. Petrie directed a party of about 30 people, and had a lot to do to keep them alive in this mountainous desert. The conditions were very harsh and pushed the party to their limits. His main collaborators were Philip Button, Montague Porch, Charles Corelli, Kingdon Tregose Frost, Raymond Weil, and Lena Eckenstein. They were later joined by Petrie's wife Hilda, herself also an Egyptologist. They had to clear the temple, analyze the architecture of the structure, take pictures and copy its inscriptions, and work on the datation and identification of the different parts before restoration. Hilda, herself also an Egyptologist, was the first to notice stone slabs in the turquoise mines, inscribed with unusual signs that appeared to be 5 or 6 centuries older than the earliest Phoenician, and that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs but much more simply drawn, as if by a child. Petrie, upon closer inspection, realized the script was wholly alphabetic, yet still pictographic. These represented a new stage of evolution of writing. He finally had proof for what many, such as Thomas Young, were expecting. The first alphabet, or Ajab, was Semitic, a central northwest Semitic language from Canaan, possibly Proto-Phoenician or Israelite. Their findings, along with 300 photographs taken of the site, were published in 1906 under the title Researches in Sinai. The proto-alphabetic inscriptions of the Sinai were then more precisely documented and studied during the following years by Alan Gardiner and his team, Yaroslav Cherny and Eric Peet. This is the end of part 1 of our Serabit el-Khadim video that explores the origins of the alphabet. In part 2, we will go to the mines and search for proto-alphabetic inscriptions in Egypt and even in Arabia for a possibly new, exclusive discovery presented for the first time here on YouTube, in search of inscriptions and reliefs that could help us understand the origin of the alphabet. Please like and share and support our work to speed up the production of this upcoming final part of this video and discover who wrote these inscriptions.